Hello again, Bible students, and welcome once again to the study of the book of Revelation. We've come now to chapter 4 in the book of Revelation of John's vision which he saw. Now, it's going to be important for us as we go into this chapter to keep in mind the fact that John is in vision. We are not talking here about something that happened in the real world, in real time, where John simply accounts recognizable items, things, events, sequences of events that all take place in a nice order. As you probably know from your own dreams, dreams are not limited by time, that things change very strangely in dreams, that sometimes you can be carrying on a conversation, a dream with one person, and without even noticing the change, suddenly be talking to a totally different person. That individuals change, times change, places change, stories lose their chain and start off in another different direction with no warning whatsoever. Now, a vision is not entirely like that. What goes on in dreams, I think, sometimes is random depending upon what part of the brain is being tickled at a given point of time. But a vision has many of the same qualities, so don't expect to find literal interpretations. Don't expect to find every symbol capable of interpretation. Just realize that John is recording for you what happened as he was in vision, and things happened in this vision that he tries his best to record faithfully for you. He begins in chapter 4 by saying, "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were that of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up here, and I will show you the things which must be hereafter." So what was to be seen in vision before he was all done with it were things that were to be hereafter. Now, hereafter what is not explained. Well, normally we would think sometime after the time that John saw the vision, or perhaps sometime after the significance of the the letters to the 7 churches in this chapters 2 and 3. But I'm afraid it's not quite that specific all the time. For the moment, let's just take him at his word. I want to show you the things that will be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. Now, no man in the flesh can come into the presence of God and live. That's the importance of John saying, I was in the Spirit. And that what was happening here was strictly a matter of a vision, of what he was seeing in the vision, not a reality of John coming into God's presence. Therefore, John could be allowed to see in a dream or a vision of God's throne, of God sitting on it, and of all the things that went on about it. So that he saw. I saw a throne sat in heaven, and one sat on the throne. Now, if we're looking for any kind of symbolism in the imagery that goes along, what you would normally find relative to throne is power. That the one who sits on the throne is the one who is in power. And he that sat on it was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone, and there was a rainbow round about the throne in sight, like as unto an emerald. Now, rainbow is probably misleading in this particular case. The word is more that of an iris, like the iris of an eye. And so if you can visualize God's throne as a source of enormous power and great light, if it were any kind of a hazy situation, it would create a halo around the throne that would be much like the iris of an eye. He says around the throne of God there was this iris or halo that was like an emerald in color. That is to say, it was green and translucent or transparent, a vivid thing in his imagery. So, do you dream in color? Well, visions apparently certainly take place in color. There seems to be no great significance to the jasper and carnelian stones beyond that of showing the tremendous glory that exists around God's throne. And around about the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. I was reading in a commentary recently, and it said they had found not less than 13 significant different kinds of interpretations about what the 24 elders are. So I think we can be fairly safe in saying that there's no definitive biblical explanation as to who these are. Of some significance is the multiple of 12, though, because 12 throughout the Bible is a number symbolic of divine government. And so consequently, these people participating, in a sense, in the governance of God, they are called the 24 elders. The situation if you can visualize it at all, is not at all unlike a throne at one end and then a number of chairs sitting down both sides of an aisle in front of it and around the front of it, in which these people sit. They are like counselors to God, like advisors to God. I recall a scene out of Henry V where the king is sitting on his throne, and then down the aisle in front of him on either side sit his knights. They are the ones who fight for him and fight with him and carry out his instructions and carry messages hither and yon. If you visit Westminster Abbey, you'll see the two lines of seats in this place where the lords, that is the Knights of the Garter and what have you, sit. They are the king's counselors, or in this case the queen's counselors, her advisors, her defenders also, as it were. The 24 elders seem to form, what shall we say, something of a cabinet for God, a cabinet-level officials for God, rulers. They seem to have thrones, which suggest that they have rulership and responsibility. Who are they? The Bible just simply does not say. They are clothed in white raiment, which again means righteousness. They have on their heads crowns of gold, which suggests that they have responsibility. Out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Oh my, are there things in here we would like to know more about? The lightnings and the thunderings pose no great problem in the sense that with all of the enormous power that is in this one place, the fact that there be cracklings of energy going back and forth and flashes of light and rolling of power and of thunder should surprise no one. The 7 lamps of fire burning in front of the throne of God, being the 7 spirits of God, is of some interest. There are places where he calls his angels spirits. The spirits of God go to and fro in the earth, observing things for God. God has 7 eyes that go to and fro. We need to bear in mind again, though, that the word 7 means all, or totality, or whole, and it isn't necessarily quite a literal number in all cases. What does this mean? Well, we'll have to file it away in memory, knowing that before his throne there are 7 lamps burning, which are the 7 spirits of God, and we will hear of them again. And before the throne there was a sea of glass, like crystal, and in the midst of this throne and around about the throne were 4 beasts, that is, living creatures, full of eyes, before and behind. Now, the description of these creatures as we hear them described, beasts is a very unfortunate translation. Living creatures is probably a lot closer. The description of these makes a comparison with the seraphim of Isaiah, probably more closely than the cherubim of Ezekiel, but they are obviously angelic beings. They are described. The first beast, or living creature, was like a lion. The second was like a calf. The third had the face like a man, and the fourth had the face of a flying eagle. And the 4 beasts, each of them had 6 wings. This is where the comparison with the cherubim of Isaiah. They flew with 2, they covered their feet with 2, covered their face with 2, as they went about. And they don't rest day or night, crying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which was and is to come. And when these creatures gave glory and honor and thanks to him that sat on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fell down before him that sat upon the throne, and worshiped him that lives forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you have created all things, and for your pleasure they were created. You have created all things, and they were created for your pleasure. In other words, everything that exists, the stars, the heavenly bodies, the galaxies, the sun, the moon, the earth upon which we walk, and all the things that are in them were created by God, and he did it for his own pleasure. Now, pleasure, I think, in this case, shouldn't be understood as entertainment, but rather as pleased him, because of his purposes and his goal, and what it was that God was trying to do. It suggests right here that God had a purpose, a goal, and an objective in the things that he created. And it seems rare for people who interpret the Bible to give much thought to this. God created the heavens and the earth. Fine. Why did he do it? What was his objective? Where was he going? Now, the scene that is pictured to us here seems bizarre. It is presented as though it's just an ongoing cacophony around God's throne of people shouting and singing praises to God and throwing crowns down. And, you know, you can't just throw crowns down all the time. You've got to go pick them up if you're going to throw them down again. What this seems to suggest is that in the moment that John enters the throne room in vision, that as the development of what he sees takes place before him, as those who are in this throne room, the living creatures and the 24 elders, contemplate the meaning of all of this, that the power of God, his power as creator, his objective, what it is he's trying to do, where it is he's going, all of this wells up inside of them, and the living creatures who are around him sing his praises, and the 24 elders, when that singing starts, are so overwhelmed with it all that they take their thrones and cast them down before God and say, our crowns are as nothing before you. Our crowns mean nothing. Our power means nothing. We derive it all from you, and we owe it all to you. When one, it seems to me, really comes face to face with God, when one really begins to understand the power and the honor and the glory, the accomplishments of God, the overwhelming nature of it, what is there to do but throw down all of your crowns, throw down all of your accomplishments, cast them on the ground, and prostrate yourself before God in honor and praise and obeisance of him. For what is there that a man or an angel or a living creature or one of the 24 elders has when they come into the presence of God? It's an enormous vision of John's, and one worthy of taking the time to contemplate in the mind's eye, although the mind's eye is going to lie to you and diminish what was really there. For there is no way that John could describe it, and if he were able to describe it, there's no way that you could really visualize what it all means. Now for chapter 5. And I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book, written within and on the backside, and sealed with 7 seals. Now you immediately, when you read this, visualize a book, not unlike the Bible you may have in your lap as you're listening to this. But in fact, what this was a scroll, and the scroll was sealed with 7 seals. Now, commentators have approached this thing from 2 different directions, and you'll have to think about it as we work our way through it, because John's vision, he sees it, and he sort of describes it, but he does not anticipate some of the problems we may have, and so we have some uncertainty. A scroll, of course, is rolled up, and normally a scroll was only written on one side. You wrote on the front side of it, you rolled that up, and all the writing then was on the inside of the scroll. All of the formal or public scrolls were done this way. Usually a scroll that was written on both sides was a private one. Public scrolls were generally open. Private scrolls were sealed. And so consequently, as in the case of a testament, and so consequently, this particular one seems to have been written on one side, flipped over, written on the other side, then rolled up so that there was writing on the inside of the scroll and on the outside. Now, commentators again picture the seals in 7 ways. If you can visualize a scroll wrapped around a spindle, as it were, some visualize it as having been sealed with 7 seals along the outside edge of it so that nothing can be read. It cannot be opened at all until all 7 of the seals are open. I believe it was Herbert Armstrong whose interpretation of this was that the scroll was opened 1/7 at a time. You opened a seal and you rolled it out, and part of it was there. And then you had another seal to break, and you rolled it out still further. That being the case, what he is suggesting is that the message of the scroll is actually the message of the events that are described as each of the seals is broken on this occasion. On the other hand, a lot of commentators, and again, I don't know how you can tell necessarily from the book of Revelation itself which way it goes, although we'll think about it as we go along, that the idea was that the contents of this scroll had to do with the greatness of God's plan, the mystery of God, what it was that God was doing, where this was all going to culminate, and that all 7 of the seals had to be broken before the mystery of God was accomplished and fulfilled. And there is a case that can be made for that, so we'll think about them as we go along. One thing that is very clear is that as the seals are broken, different events take place in sequential order. They may or may not be written in the scroll, for what John saw when the seal was broken was not what was written in the scroll, but the event as it took place. So let's study it. I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within on the backside, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, Who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof? And no man in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the book or to look on it. And I wept much. I wept and I wept because no man was found worthy to open and read the book, neither to look thereon. It's one of those curious dream things. He was just overwhelmed by this thing. He desperately wanted to know what was in that book, and I guess we all would be if we envision we're in the throne room of God, and God has got a book in his right hand, and it's a scroll with seals on it, as though it could be broken open and read, and the angel says, Who can open it? Who can open it? Who can open it? Now, in Roman societies, what was done with some of these scrolls, there would be 6 seals, normally not 7, put along the spine of the scroll, each of them bearing a different name of the person who had sealed it. It's a testament. In other words, it's his will. It's all written out, it's rolled up, and it's sealed with 7 seals. And the only person that can open this is the person who sealed it. In other words, let's say an attorney did all this stuff for a man and rolled the scroll up and sealed it right down the line with the names of the man and who it was all about. The only person lawfully who could then open those seals was the one who actually sealed them up. The suggestion here then is they could not find anybody to open this up because the person who sealed it was not there to open it. Although the cry is not so much for that as it is for one who is worthy to open it. Although on the other hand, it may well have to do with the sealer rather than merely with his qualifications. In any case, as he wept about it, one of the elders said to him, Don't weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. So John would naturally expect then that when he uses those terms, John would have known immediately that he was talking about the Messiah, the one who was to come out of the tribe of Judah, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David. He's the man that's going to open these seals and proclaim them. So here comes the Messiah, thinks John. And he looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and the 4 beasts, or right there with them, stood a lamb as it had been slain. Actually, the expression is almost as though the lamb with its throat cut, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into the earth. So here's the connection between those 7 spirits, which were first presented to us as lamps of fire. Now they are presented to us as the 7 eyes of God. And the Lamb has these 7 spirits of God. They're his. Then also, he has the 7 horns. And the implication of this, horns, by the way, in this sense, are symbolic of power or rulership. So he has all rulership, power, or governance given to him. He has the control of the 7 eyes or the 7 spirits of God. He's the one who has qualified to be in control of everything. Which is why Jesus said at the end of his ministry to his disciples, All power is given to me in heaven and earth. I want you to go preach the gospel to all creatures. And so consequently, he comes and takes the book out of the right hand of him that sat upon the throne. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials full of odors, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sung a new song, saying, You are worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof. For you were slain, and have redeemed us to God by your blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and have made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. Hold on a second. Reading this as we do, in this context, this sounds like these 24 elders are people who lived in this life, and who qualified to reign upon the earth, and who are made kings and priests unto God, because a lot of this stuff sounds very much like the promises that were made to the saints through their lifetime. And yet, we haven't come to the resurrection of the dead. Are there people in heaven right now? Are there who have lived lives on this earth? Now, if you'll recall, when I started off on this side of the tape, I said this, that this is a vision. John is seeing things in vision, and time doesn't count in a vision. And so consequently, when he sees all of this taking place there, that the anticipation in vision is that these 24 elders, who might very well have been kings and priests, that they say, You have redeemed us to God by your blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and have made us unto our God kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. That these are people redeemed by God from the earth. Now, I understand that there are some ancient manuscripts that indicate that us, as it's found through here, and our God and we, are actually in some of these other manuscripts in the third person, which means it has redeemed them to God. You have made them unto their God kings and priests, and they shall reign upon the earth. And that is, of course, a possibility. But I think it's not necessary. I think it's easily enough understood that what he is seeing is what will be, and he's seeing it in vision, in which time has no relevance and no meaning. So a great new song is sung before the Lamb, a song of praise. You are worthy to take the book, you are worthy to open it. And I beheld, and I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beasts, and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000, and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb that was slain, to receive power, and riches, and wisdom, and strength, and honor, and glory, and blessing. Handel has done a marvelous job of this in the Messiah with that great chorus, Worthy is the Lamb. And they tick off all of these things that the Lamb was worthy to receive. You know, there are times when I think some wonder a little bit about singing praise to Jesus, to Christ, and wondering, well, you know, are we neglecting the Father, or should we be singing, you know, praise to the Father rather than to Christ? And yet, here is one of the greatest hymns right here in the book of Revelation ever written, and the hymn is to the Lamb. And it says that he is worthy to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. For us to sing praises to the name of Jesus, to who he is, to what he has done, is appropriate. And every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth, and such as are in the sea, and all the beasts that are in them, I heard, saying, Blessing and honor and glory and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and to the Lamb forever and ever. Now wait. We're talking about where we are in time, remember? If we're limited to time, if we're limited to sailing along in a given span of time, we are still before the resurrection. We're still at a time when a great deal of the world and all the people in it are in rebellion against God. But what John is seeing is a time when every creature in heaven and earth are actually going to be in subjection to God, and who will sing blessing and honor and glory and power be unto him that sits upon the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever. And the four beasts said, Amen. And the 24 elders fell down and worshipped him that lives forever and ever. Now we're ready for Revelation 6, the opening of the seals. Beginning in verse 1 it says, And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard as it were the noise of thunder, and one of the four beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Now begins the famous four horsemen of the apocalypse. What do they mean? What's the symbolism that's connected to them? If you just reach out and collect any old set of symbols and kind of try to explain them, you could come up with a lot of different things. But that's not really the way to approach these. First, let's take a look at just briefly at the other four horsemen and see if we can understand what it's about. In verse 3 it says, He opened the second seal, and I heard the second beast come and say, Come and see. And there went out a horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat on it, to take peace from the earth. They should kill one another. And there was given a great sword. Well, normally one would think of that as war, right? A sword in hand and charging off into battle to kill a lot of people. And verse 5, when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see you hurt not the oil and the wine. Then comes the fourth seal opened, and the fourth beast says, Come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him was Death, and Hell. Basically what it's talking about is famine and sword and hunger, and with the beasts of the earth. Now, these four horsemen are introduced here without any real explanation of the symbolism, although you can kind of derive, as you read them, some idea of what they might mean. But in fact, they run sharply parallel to what Christ was talking about in the Olivet prophecy. Matthew's account of the Olivet prophecy is not the only one. Others of the gospel writers include them, but his is probably the most comprehensive. The account of it is found in Matthew 24, and it happens on a day when Jesus was going about the temple, and with his disciples were with him, and they were pointing out to him, pointing no doubt and exclaiming over the sights of the temple. And they were pointing out the buildings of the temple, excited about them. And Jesus said to them, "You see these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone that shall be left on top of another that shall not be thrown down." Now this shocked the disciples because they were accustomed to thinking of the temple as a permanent edifice. It had been destroyed once before, of course, but not again, surely. Surely we are going to see this building go on, and this is the place of God's presence, and God would never let anything happen to this place. And Jesus now says, "I'm telling you, the time is coming when there's not going to be one stone here left upon top of another that shall not be thrown down." Well, as he later sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, in Matthew 24, verse 3, "When shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus answered and said, "I want you to be careful about this, that no one deceives you." He begins now to answer their question about what are the signs of his coming and of the end of the age. And he says, "Let no man deceive you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." I remember just a boy hearing people say that, well, one of the things that's a sign of the end of the world was wars and rumors of wars. And I was hearing a lot of this during World War II. And everybody wondered, is this going to be the last war? They forgot to notice that Jesus said, when you hear of wars and rumors of wars, don't be troubled by this, because the end is not yet. Not that the end is yet. He says, "Nation shall rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places." Oh, then as we get down toward the time of the end, we will have war, we will have famine, we will have pestilence, we will have earthquakes. Now he says, all these things are just the beginning of birth pangs. The word sorrows is actually, I think, the word for labor, and has to do with the pains of a woman who's going into travail. In other words, once these things begin to roll, says Jesus, the end is not yet. What you are seeing in these things is the beginning of all these pains that are going to come about. Now, he is laying out here in a very brief way a sequence of events that must take place at the end time. And we get the parallel easily enough with the wars and rumors of wars, and the famines and the pestilences. But what came before them? Well, don't be deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. Now let's go back to Revelation 6 and consider what we find there. Here we find again the different seals and the four horsemen coming forth. When the first seal is opened, John said he heard, like it was, the voice of thunder, and one of the four beasts saying, Come. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. What we see here, especially when you understand, you're comparing it with Revelation 19, where Christ comes, seated on a white horse, with a sword in his hand, not a bow, but a sword. Then you compare it with with Matthew 24, which says that there will come, prior to these wars and the rumors of wars and the famines and the pestilences, there will come false teachers and false Christ and a great deception. So the white horse of these four horsemen symbolizes the false Christ who will come, the one who pretends to be Christ and who is going forth conquering and to conquer, which of course the false Christ will be doing, the Antichrist and all the things that he does. Also notice that each of the four horsemen is called forth by a different one of the four beasts. It's the first beast that says, and the second beast says, Come. Also, some of the ancient manuscripts say not come and see, but simply come. They suggest that what is happening here is that the first beast says, "Come," and calls forth the first of the white horses. And then, of course, John sees the first horse and his rider as he comes forward. When he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, "Come." And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, that they should kill one another. And there was given to him a great sword. The implications of this are that as we come toward the end time, and leading into it, that we're going to have a time of intense religious deception. Jesus said, we'll go back to Matthew 24 in a moment, that the deception could become so serious that if it were possible, it would even deceive the very elect. That we will head, as we go into the very end time, one of the most confusing times that men have ever gone through as far as religion is concerned. Then what's going to follow on the heels of this will be war, and war of a serious kind, perhaps surpassing anything that we have ever seen on the planet before. And when he had opened the third seal, verse 5, I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And behold, a black horse, and he that sat upon him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice speak, saying, "A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and be really careful not to hurt the oil and the wine." They're actually begin to measure out food in very, very tiny measures. One of the commentaries suggests that the prices here run about 12 times the normal prices for items like this. Food is scarce. People are taking great care with every little piece of food, every little cup of wine, every little container of oil has to be watched carefully. Famine. And of course, famine is an accompaniment of war. When people are out fighting one another, instead of out getting in the harvest, they're out destroying the harvest too. There's not enough food for everyone to eat. And so people are dying not only from war, they're dying from famine. Look at what happens in Bosnia. Look at what's happened in Africa. As wars are fought and refugees go on the road and people start starving to death. And what else follows on the heels of it? Pestilence. Verse 7, when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come, see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death. And hell followed him, that is, the grave. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword and hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. More people dying right and left. Then in verse 9, when he had opened the fifth seal, now we're through with the 4 horsemen, so there is no come and see. As if it were John, one would expect him to say one more time, "Come and see, come look," but he doesn't. He's not calling for the horsemen this time. But the seal is opened, and John saw under the altar the lives of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice. Now, mind you, we're in vision. This has sometimes been used by people who believe in the immortality of the soul to say, see, all these souls are up here in heaven waiting for the resurrection and crying out for God to avenge them. But in fact, it's a vision, it's a metaphor, it's a symbolism thing. Not that these souls are alive where they can cry out, because they are dead and in the grave. But nevertheless, they are symbolically like the blood of Abel cried from the ground against Cain. They are crying out for vengeance from God. And in vision, John sees them and hears them saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, do you not judge and avenge our blood upon them that dwell upon the earth?" And white robes were given to them, and it was said to them that they should rest yet for a little season. In other words, it's not quite time yet for you to be resurrected, empowered, and sent out to conquer the world yourself. But they were given white robes, which means they were accounted as righteous. And it was said they should rest yet for a little season until their fellow servants also, and their brethren that should be killed as they were, should be fulfilled. In other words, there are still more to die in religious persecution of people who will not receive the mark of the beast, for example, are yet to be killed. Those people who will fight the beast and will refuse to accept and be dominated by him. So more and more people are yet destined to be killed as of this point in time, if indeed we are talking in any way about time. So as we approach the end time, great religious deception, wars, famines, pestilences, and religious persecution of the true saints of God, as you would expect with religious deception raging across the planet. that those who remain faithful and true to what God has taught would find themselves persecuted and chased about from place to place. And I beheld, verse 12, when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became as black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. You can imagine what happens with a great belching out. Perhaps it could be like volcanoes belching out their smoke. And because of the enormous amount of dust in the air, the sun becomes like you can barely see it. It's like sackcloth of hair, and the moon, when it comes up, is, if you can see it at all, is dark red because of all of the dust that's in the air. And he goes on to say, the stars of the heaven fell to the earth, like a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. In other words, the plop, 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 the very rapid plopping of figs to the ground is like the speed with which this meteor shower is falling upon the earth. And of course, if the earth is being bombarded by meteors, the dust cast up by the meteors could easily create a circumstance where the sun is black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon has become like blood. Then it says the heaven departed like a scroll when it's rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. You know, they tell us that this sort of thing has happened to the planet before. They find evidence of meteor strikes, not merely one or two, but many of them in different places. And there are those who believe that even the extinguishing of large animal life, like the dinosaurs that were on the earth before, took place because of meteor strikes that put so much dirt in the atmosphere that they brought on a winter time, a cosmological winter, as it were, of enormous proportions. That created an ice age and caused all kinds of creatures to die out. And you can imagine the earth being rocked by violent earthquakes from place to place, with huge meteor showers coming and the striking of large heavenly bodies to the planet, throwing dust in the air, maybe even triggering volcanic eruptions by what they do. The time is a frightening time to even contemplate. And he said, but it seems to be something that is in our future. Now, we saw one of the planets bombarded with a comet just not very long ago, sequentially, just one after another, pieces of this comet bombarding the planet. It's staggering to think of the implications of what would happen if something like that happened to planet Earth. It's happened before, so it's not at all difficult to imagine it happening again. And here it is staring at us from the pages of the Bible as a concrete prophecy of what's going to happen in the future. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, verse 15, and the rich men, and the captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Oh, you know, you think of a little lamb being so mild and so endearing. But we're talking about the Lamb of God that taketh away the sin of the world, and we're talking about him coming back to the earth in great wrath and in fury. And there is a time that is called the day of his wrath. This is the day of the Lord, the eschatological day of the Lord, the end-time day of the Lord, a time of God intervening in the affairs of man, and nobody's going to be able to stand. When that type of thing happens, they'll all have the ground shaken from under their feet. They'll be prostrate on the ground before the Lord, the God of heaven. Now, before we go on with the book of Revelation, let's return to the Olivet prophecy in Matthew 24 to consider what all this means. Maybe even to consider the timing of it, because Revelation isn't terribly helpful in this regard. Jesus has said that nation shall arise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There'll be famines, pestilence, earthquakes in various places. And he says, this is just the beginning. It's going to get a lot worse. He then talked about a time in verse 9 of Matthew 24 of religious persecution, of our being afflicted because of the false prophets that are raging about the landscape. So we'll be afflicted. They'll kill you. You'll be hated of all nations for my name's sake. People will be offended and will betray one another. We're going to have people of their own family actually turning against one another. False prophets, he said, are going to arise and shall deceive many, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will wax cold. Many people who otherwise would have been faithful to God, because the lawlessness just continues to abound in society at large, they begin to forsake the love of God themselves and the law of God themselves, and the love of many shall wax cold. And he has, though, in Matthew 24:13, this one cry to us, "He that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved." In other words, don't give up. Because all this is happening, and because persecution is arising, and because iniquity is abounding on every side, know this, that the love of many people who actually did love God will wax cold. Don't let it happen to you. Endure to the end. He goes on to say that this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. You may not be effective everywhere. You may not convert everybody. In fact, it's said to be sure that you will not. But he does say that the gospel of the kingdom has to be preached everywhere. And when it has been preached everywhere for a witness, whether people listen or whether they don't, he said, only then can the end come. The scope of that, what does it mean? How far-reaching does it have to be? He doesn't say. The Bible has been printed in nearly every language under heaven. There have been people who have gone everywhere taking that Bible, and that Bible in itself is a powerful witness. It has the words of salvation in it, and a person who sits down and reads it without benefit of a preacher can come to understand about God. But he said it's got to happen. Then he says something interesting in verse 15. "When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place. Whoso reads, let him understand." Now, and right at this point comes a warning that there is a danger that you could misunderstand this. So I think it's important that we treat this with care. I'm not going to give you altogether the interpretation of this. What I want you to know is what it means, so that whenever you come along down through history and events begin to take place, you will recognize what is happening for what it is. To try to tell you ahead of time, I might point you in the wrong direction. But if I help you to understand simply what the Bible says, and let you wait for history to fulfill it, I think you'll be on much safer ground. "When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place." The holy place is the heart and core of the temple itself. It is where the Ark of the Covenant was. It is there was a veil that separated the outer part of the temple from the inner part of the temple. It was a place where no one was supposed to go. Well, once before, someone had actually gone. Daniel foretold it, and actually a man named Antiochus Epiphanes fulfilled it as they offered pagan sacrifices in God's temple, and the man went stomping in jackboots right into the heart of the temple itself. And they established there an idolatrous statue, an abomination which made desolate, as it's called, in the holy place. Now, one can only conclude then from what Jesus says here that this is going to happen again. Now, for it to happen again, though, there has to be a holy place. There has to be a temple. There has to be an edifice, or at least there has to be a tabernacle. It would not require a temple as such for there to be a holy place, because there was a holy place and a holy of holies in the tabernacle, that is, the tent in which the ark dwelt for so long. But there has to be a place which is holy, which is designated as such, which is a part of the worship of God, into which someone intrudes and establishes a kind of abomination of desolation. Now he says, when you see this, then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Now there's been over the years a lot of talk about the flight of the church. In other words, of us fleeing off to a place of safety, as though those of us living down here in Texas might gather with those living in Minnesota. We meet somewhere and we are taken away to a place of safety. The people who are to flee are the ones who live in Judea. And they're to do this because the setting of this abomination is a preliminary to the destruction of the city and the killing of lots and lots of people who are in it. So when you see this take place, then it says, get out of Judea, flee into the mountains, get yourself away, because the city is going to fall. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Don't let him which is in the field turn back to take his clothes. What it's saying is this: it is going to be coming so fast, you don't have time for anything except when you hear of it to get out of here, because the city is going to fall. Woe unto them that are with child and those that give suck in those days. And pray that the flight, that is your flight out of Jerusalem, be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day, because in the Sabbath day the gates could be closed and you couldn't get out. For then there shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, No, nor ever shall be. So we are talking about now a time that is the greatest time of trouble that has ever happened in the history of the world. There has never been a time before it. There will never again be a time after it in which there is this kind of trouble. It's a period of time that is called the Great Tribulation, the time of great trouble. And one would hope to be protected, to be saved, to be somewhere secure at that time. And there is indication, as we've already seen on the church at Philadelphia, that they would be kept from the time of trial that would come upon all the earth. But again, there's no question there of them having a time of flight. Daniel's place of safety was in the lion's den. Daniel, Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego were carried into Babylon into captivity, and they were kept safe in captivity. Actually, a captivity of that sort, where you are protected, by the host country, keeps you from undergoing some of the ravages of the people who might have been left behind and fell prey to the invading army. So there's no definite statement here of protection or being carried away into a place of safety, although there is the warning that when you see some of these things, to flee and get out of the city of Jerusalem. There's going to be great tribulation such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be again. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. Flesh be saved. Saving flesh is not salvation we're talking about here, and the saving of men's souls. We're talking about saving people alive. The implication is that what people have feared now for a long time, that is, of the possibility of a nuclear winter and of so much destruction and misery upon the earth, that all of mankind, all flesh, all life could be blotted out off the face of the planet. Here, 2,000 years ago in a prophecy, Jesus says the time could come when that's possible, and in fact, unless the days are cut short, it will happen. It's a sobering thing to consider. The implications, the statements are that God, for the elect's sake, will cut short the days at the end of time so that man does not destroy himself from off the planet. If any man says to you, "Oh, Christ is over here, he's already come," or "He's over there, he's already here on earth," don't believe it. They're going to arise false Christs and false prophets, and they're going to show great signs and wonders to such an extent that if it were possible, they would deceive the very elect. I said, and I meant it, there's going to come a time so confusing that you will begin to doubt your sanity, and that everybody will be confused and deceived. And if it's possible, even the elect of God will be deceived. And you can't just trust in the fact that God's going to keep you from it. You're going to have to keep your own wits about you. You're going to have to pay attention. You're going to have to test things by the Bible, because it could be possible for you to be deceived. Behold, I have told you before. If they say unto you, he's in the desert, don't go. If they say he's in the secret chamber, don't believe them. For as the light comes out of the east and shines to the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, what is he saying? He's saying, folks, when he comes back, you're going to know it. You're not going to have somebody come to you and say, "Oh, he's over here," "Oh, he's over there," or "We've got Christ in the secret chambers." It is not going to be that way. In verse 29, he said, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken." Now, you're getting the picture of where we are. There are times of great trouble, of wars and rumors of wars and famines and earthquakes and pestilences. Then comes a time of terrible persecution and confusion. And immediately after that, the darkening of the sun, the moon, and so forth. It corresponds very closely to what we have just read over with the seals in Revelation. The seals in Revelation can be overlaid Matthew 24 and the Olivet prophecy, because both of them are talking about the same period of time. So that this martyrdom of saints talked about over in Revelation is a time of great tribulation when lots of faithful people of God are going to be killed. So the whole church of God isn't taken away in a place of safety and protected, because a whole lot of them are going to go through a period of time of great trouble and persecution, and a lot of them yet are going to die for the faith. In fact, those who are dying are going to be among the strongest spiritually of people who will not accept the deception and the religious deception that's coming down on every side of them. And then there shall appear, in verse 30, the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. All the tribes of the earth will mourn. They'll see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he'll send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now make a note of the trumpet, because we're going to come back to Revelation very soon now, and we're going to find a series of trumpets. And it is in one of these trumpets that the dead are raised, and the elect are gathered from the four winds of the heaven to the earth. Now the thing that always we all want to know is when. How long do we have before these things happen? How will we know what is going to lead into them? Jesus answers in verse 32, I want you to learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender, and he begins to put forth his leaves, you know that summer is near. So likewise you, when you shall see all these things, know that it's near, even at the doors. In other words, you're going to begin to see these things happening. The first seal is going to be opened. The deception is going to become intense. It will not be something, I think, though, that everybody recognizes. The initial beginnings of these seven seals could be a little bit subtle. People will be prone to say, well, we've had this before. We've had wars before. We've had famines before. This is probably just going to be another one. Maybe worse, but just another one. But a person who watches and who keeps his eyes open is going to say, I think it could be near. It could be at the doors. Then he makes an interesting statement. Verily I say unto you, that this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Now, you could make a mistake here and think that John's generation should not pass. But remember, John's in vision. We're not necessarily talking about the time in which John lived. We're talking about the generation that sees these things begin to come to pass. I realize that Jesus is not in vision in Matthew 24, but it connects. And the fact is, it's going to be the people who see these things start happening, who are the last generation before the coming of Christ. And he says, this generation shall not pass till all these things shall be fulfilled. So you could have, from the beginning to the end of these things, several years take place, from the beginning of religious deception through the wars and the famines, and for a famine to really have much effect, quite a bit of time has had to pass. So the opening of these seals could take place perhaps even over a generation from the time they begin. But once they begin to roll, he said, there will not be a generation pass until it has happened. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but of my words shall not pass away. Then, beginning in verse 36, he, though, gives us the definitive answer to our plea to know when is it going to happen. He says, but of that day and hour knows no man, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as it was in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. They didn't know until the flood came. Well, it's going to be exactly the same way in the day of the Son of Man. That as bad as these things are, there will still be people, life will still be going on. They will still be finding excuses as to why this isn't the return of Christ. Then shall two be in the field, one taken, the other left. Two men be grinding at the mill, one taken, the other left. Watch therefore, for you don't know what hour your Lord does come. But know this, if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. So be ready in such an hour as you think not the Son of Man comes. I suppose back in those days when some people were predicting that Christ would come in 72 or 75, as soon as they came to that conviction, they should have known they were wrong. It's that simple. He said, in what hour, such an hour as you think not, he will come. So if you think an hour, it can't be the hour. Who is a faithful and wise servant whom his Lord has made ruler over his household to give them food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he comes, shall find doing the work. So what are we supposed to do as we come down toward the end time, as we come down and start seeing things happening? Well, we're supposed to get on with the work, get on with the job God's given us at hand. There is no point in time when we are allowed to say, oh, I see, Christ is coming, let's stop working and let's all flee to a place of safety. No, that's not allowed. And an important thing for you to know about being, quote, taken, end quote, to a place of safety. When Lot, his wife and children, the time came for them to leave Sodom, they were told very specifically by the angels to go. And when they tarried, the angels took them by the hand and led them out. So when the time comes for you to go, or if it comes to go, or where you're to go, wait for the angel to come and take you by the hand and lead you out. You don't have to worry about when it's going to happen and spotting the signs. Before we finish this side of the tape, I'd like to point you to some other tapes that might be of use to you in your study of prophecy along these lines. One is a tape entitled An Outline of Prophecy by Garner Ted Armstrong. If you want to know the sequence of events to occur at the end of the world, you don't want to miss this sermon. Garner Ted Armstrong systematically covers the relevant prophecies in a message anyone can understand. He shows the order of the Great Tribulation, the heavenly signs, the day of the Lord, the sealing of the 144,000, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpet plagues. This is another resource for you to listen to work your way through much of the symbolism of the book of Revelation. I think you might find it interesting and find it enjoyable. Another sermon by Garner Ted Armstrong is, quote, To See the Kingdom. Jesus preached the good news of the kingdom of God, but who understands what he was really saying? Is the kingdom here now, or is the kingdom yet to come? Garner Ted Armstrong explains these questions directly from the pages of your Bible. It goes right along with understanding the kingdom of God, what it is, and when is it to come. Another Garner Ted Armstrong sermon along these lines is entitled War with the Lamb. It looks ahead in Revelation to Revelation 17, which speaks of 10 nations or kingdoms that will make war with the Lamb. And it's incredible that human armies, with modern warfare, technology, and intelligence and training, will dare to think they can overcome Christ, the King of Kings, who is coming in power and great glory.